So the story actually was triggered initially by the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail by Bejon, Lincoln and Lee, which you probably haven't read yet.
No.
In the 1980s, there was a lot of scholarship around the idea of a bloodline heritage. And that's taken into account by a lot of different schools of understanding, particularly, and it comes through in the tarot. You'll find it on the magician card. You'll get the lily and you'll get the rose. And the rose was associated with women who was, have you read Thunder Perfect Mind?
No. It's one that's on the list though, because you've told me about that one.
Right. Thunder Perfect Mind, if I can just, I'm just going to get out of here for a second and find that.
Yeah, go.
It says, I was sent forth from the power, and I have come to those who reflect upon me, and I have been found among those who seek after me. Look upon me, you who reflect upon me, and you hearers hear me. You who are waiting for me, take me to yourselves, and do not banish me from your sight. And do not make your voice hate me, nor your hearing. Do not be ignorant of me anywhere at any time. Be on your guard. Do not be ignorant of me. For I am the first and the last. I am the honored one and the scorned one. I am the whore and the holy one. I am the wife and the virgin. I am the mother and the daughter. I am the members of my mother. I am the barren one, and many are her sons. And it continues from there for several pages. And this was found in an urn in, I think it was 1947, by a goat herd. A whole pile of scrolls in this one jar in Nag Hammadi, which is Upper Egypt. And he initially took the urn home, and his mother thought it would make good firewood. And he was canny enough to take it to an antiquarian in Cairo, who was like, fuck, what have we got here? These are 2,000-year-old Gnostic texts. And the Gnostics, which were early Gnostic Christians, didn't have any priesthood. They also didn't have a gender divide. And this piece is obviously written by a woman. So where does it come into that the division happened, which is another long story for another discussion to do with the division within women between the idea of a whore and a holy one, but it does go back to the construct that was invented about Solomonic magic, because the idea of King Solomon had these two women come to him with that they were both claiming a baby was theirs. And this supposed King Solomon, of course, the Temple of Solomon is associated with a lot of things in this story, but it's beside the point. They both claimed this baby was theirs. And what Solomon said is, all right, well, I'm going to get my sword out and I'm going to cut the baby in two and you can have half each. And one woman says, I don't want the child hurt. Let her have it. And he said, well, you're the mother then. If you can't hear the propaganda in that, you're not listening. A lot of animals, we don't know what was problematic about the child, if there was anything problematic about the child. Any animal that knows its offspring won't survive to adulthood will likely eat it or suffocate it or leave it behind and go on somewhere else. This idea of being a servant to one's children isn't worldwide. In many instances in tribal communities, the children just any tit will do. It doesn't have to be the mother. So what this Solomonic ideology has done is to trap a woman into the idea of being good.
Yeah.
And to, in a way, be servant to her children. Whereas there's no reason to say that the woman concerned who'd given birth to this child didn't give a shit anymore. Said, here, let her have it. You know, or I don't want it, cut it in half, I don't care. So that goes on to a different subject altogether, which is the difference between morality and ethics. Morality,
like religion.
Ethics can also be problematic, but it's only problematic to immoral people. And this is this is a really contentious area that I love.
Well, so
that's what moralities are, the idea of good and bad. This is why when we do the other classes, the idea of binary terminology like good and bad, black and white, young or old, it just creates a division that doesn't get discussed holistically. A woman and her son murdered her husband. And both of them had been tormented, terrorized physically and mentally for decades. and they couldn't get rid of him, and he wouldn't go. So in the end, in utter desperation to gain a sense of freedom and to keep themselves from going insane, they killed him. So they went to prison for murder because certain people got it through their heads to know the full story. Protest began, and they eventually got released. But what happens in a moral society is that everything is put under a blanket of one word.
Yeah.
And there's variations of that theme of that one word of murder. Instead of in an ethical society, we would take each case individually. The morality serves a certain aspect of society, not culture, of society, and then it creates a culture within that society that has a predominance towards that sensation, and then it'll make rules and laws according to that culture within a society.
Yeah, I mean that it's even that you're talking about it, I can feel the little bits of my mind going think, 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 you know, like opening up to, because I know I'm guilty of that too, you know, of
But
that.
Guilt is pointless, isn't it?
Well, yeah, well, what's another word for it? I've been in that place where I've had those thoughts.
What's the problem with that?
No, there isn't a problem.
One anthropologist went to South America, and there's tribes down there that if they pass each other on the track in the forest, they'll just kill each other.
Yeah.
The anthropologist, how could you just do that? And they go, what's your problem? Consequently, they have no population, they have no overpopulation. But the idea of death isn't seen the same.
No.
The idea of death isn't seen as something tragic and terrible because fucking everything dies.
Yeah.
So there's an animist viewpoint towards the idea of death because it doesn't really happen. All that happens is your physicality decomposes and becomes part of the soil.
Yeah.
It's really simple.
It is, when you put it in terms of that, all this stuff comes into your mind of all this stuff that you've had from childhood that just is going around and around all the time, isn't it?
And it did get mentioned to me a few years ago by friends of mine in the Northern Rivers areas that they wanted to go in and start out a funeral home because they said that's the one secret industry that nobody thinks about, where all the money is, because it's a sure thing. And that's why there's so much furor and so many rules and regulations around people who want to do natural death ceremonies. I mean, what's the problem? We've got oceans polluted with plastic, and yet nobody's allowed to be buried near the water.
Yeah.
So the hypocrisy within the idea of morality is very obvious when you follow the dots.
Yeah. We just need to talk about it more, right? Because that's how we open our minds to it and read stuff like this. Because it like I said before, there was just like this sense of freedom when I was reading about Miriam, because I was like, and I could feel me in her, you know. I knew that was part of me.
Thank you, because that's one of the things I wanted to put. When we done winoed theory,
yeah.
Well, the idea that we may not be related to these people and these ideologies and this way of life is ridiculous. So the fact that within your bloodline or within your genome very well may be part of this whole connection. This is why she had a daughter, which is why the daughters come into effect. There's daughters according to in involvement with Yeshua. There's daughters to Duncan. There's all these connections to different people in there. But of course, you've got what happened to their children? What happened to their children? What happened to their children? Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people interwoven into a new a new time, which is now, where remnants of this mystery, as far as I'm concerned, because so am I can feel the relationship really easily. And if in anyone who's a seeker, a mystic who's not trapped within an ideology, can probably relate to this story and can likely relate to one or more of the characters in the story, because they are archetypal as well as symbolic.
Yeah.
And they do come from within the bibliography, supposedly real people. But of course, one has to weave a story around these things but the story has to make sense. It can't be biased by a religious ethic. It has to be written from outside of that point of view to be able to have any form of objectivity whatsoever in the telling of the story. So I ended up having to get all the maps associated with the Phoenicians.
Yeah.
Library that I was working with, which was the Byron Library at the time. Absolutely wonderful people. Looking to the side, I'm trying to remember the name. Pat, that was the name of the head librarian at the time in Byron. She would go to the trouble of researching on my behalf, but also because she was curious, different texts that were available wherever. And she was the one who eventually got texts sent out here from the Negev Library in Jerusalem. So we went as far as that to get the books. They don't seem like they're connected to this work, but they are, because when I was looking at the antique maps, I could see the trade routes, I could see the sea routes, I could see the top of the Americas. There's mention in the texts of a group called the Mandians, and they were a group of people that weren't discovered until the 70s or 80s of the 20th century, living in the marshy areas between Iran and Iraq, who had no contact with the outside world for 2,000 years. And they knew of this man called Yeshua, and they knew of a man that was known as John the Baptist. And if you mentioned the word Yeshua, they'd spit. In their philosophy, in their mythology, they have one star that is considered really, really important. Of course, in the text, it's called the nail of it that holds up the sky, which of course is the North Star. They have one star, and that one star is called Merica. So that when you get the idea of that landscape, the understanding of the one star and America, you go, how was this known about 2,000 years ago? Similarly, the Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, which is associated with the Stuart family, was also built and completed many, 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 many years before Christopher Columbus went to America. And underneath the east wall, by the Masonic orders, underneath the east wall is maize and aloe carved into the wall. And the only place that maize and aloe can be found is in the Americas. So who was there before Christopher Columbus? How come they brought back this information? How come it went into the actual building? And how come the Masonic lodges and the Masonic orders kept all this information very close to self? And why are the two pillars both completely different in their Rosslyn Chapel to each other? And how come it's never been used as a chapel for any religious purposes whatsoever? It's never been used ceremonially. Yeah. And the Western Wall looks exactly like the Western Wall in Jerusalem of the Temple of Solomon. So there's so many mysteries within this, even down to the fact that the Magdalene orders went through the Middle Ages, even down to the Order of the Garter. No, not known about?
No.
The woman who was the royalty who dropped her garter at this particular gathering, the people associated with the Magdalene orders picked it up and hid it to make certain she never got found out about by the Christian church and persecuted.
Yeah, because a woman still wears that in it. Like you have a garter still, when you get married. Yeah.
When you're married, the garter comes off, which is your sexual prowess as an independent human being.
Yeah.
But people don't ask what the garter's got to do with. Even when you go to Chartres in France, and many, many of the huge cathedrals, they have a rose in the actual stained glass. That rose is the Magdalene.
Why? What's it about the rose? What's the connection with it?
The rose is considered to be I will say the free woman, which they'll say whore, prostitute, and the lily is the virgin. That's it. And that's why even there's this division of woman into whore and holy one. Yeah.
Like pure or not.
The lily represents the virgin, and the rose represents the wanton woman. And the rose was symbolic, or was very much associated with Morocco, where they have the festival of the pink rose every year. And the original rose perfumes were all made from the roses that came from Morocco in the Middle East. It's not an English fucking plant.
No.
But the lion was at one stage also, talking of roses and lilies, I'm flipping to the lion. The lion was used for hunting. So would it have been a gift to a monarch in another land as like the same as, for example, a lurcher?
A dog.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So these were barter. These were saleable or shareable goods because money didn't actually necessarily count.
Mm.
So the roses always represented the wanton woman, the
Mm.
whore, the sexually active woman, and the lily is the nun. But
So,
weirdly enough, the lily is the Fiordalise.
mhm.
But you had devotees all through the Middle Ages, and in all of the old texts that are written up in the bibliography, they all point to the fact that there was a particular group or Knights Templar, supposedly all the way through to the present day, of devotees to the Magdalene, because she would have been the wife of this warrior king.
Mm.
The act of sex made a woman a wife in the first phase. If she had a child, she'd become a wife in the proper phase, like I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion.
Yeah.
So she's become a wife in the proper phase, but she's gone elsewhere. She's got out of the Rami. She's got out of the destruction of the city.
Yeah.
And she's gone to where it's safe, which is to do with Joseph of Arimathea, and it's got to do with Glastonbury, where the thorn tree is planted. Can you see how I put the dots together?
Yeah.
Researchers kind of back that up. So then she's had the child, and this is the child of promise, because this becomes the next, it's connected with two bloodlines coming together, which creates a third. In Egypt, that was Osiris and Aset, or is Isis, which is the Greek word for Aset, coming together and creating Horus. But even in that story, it's a people and a people creating a third thing. And the people, how do we know that? What does the mythology there in Egypt say? Is that Set, the brother of Osiris, kills his brother and scatters him all across the country. And Aset, or Isis, goes hunting for his pieces. And in the end, she finds his penis amongst people who are a long way away. And she ends up getting pregnant by the penis with Horus, the child of promise, or Ra, in other words. What we're looking at is not a stupid fucking myth. It's to do with the people finding the original people, or the people with the seed.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then Osiris is not a man, but a place. Isis is not a woman, but a territory. Set is another territory that makes war on the territory of Osiris, scatters him everywhere, just like what happens in any war when you have refugees. The first country goes, which is Isis, goes looking for her children or the people who are connected to her to bring them back to refuge. And she finds them amongst the penis, she finds them amongst this particular people. And when they interbreed, when they come together, they produce a third person, or the next phase of sovereignty, which is Ra. So it's actually a story of people and war and the journey of one place to another. And so many myths are like this, but because we are completely inculcated by Christianity, we accept these stories as fact.
Yeah.
It's like accepting the fact that Mary Magdalene lived in a cave in Balm and shed tears till she was 53 and died and got us taken up to heaven. What the fuck is that? When you look up, what do you see? Nighttime sky. You try and find me heaven. It's ridiculous. And yet the earlier myths, which were Sumerian myths, talk about Marduk and planets that were in our solar system. These may very well be astronomical phenomenon to do with things that are remembered.
Yeah. When you were talking there about the three, is that to do with the Neshama? Am I off track when you're talking like that?
I don't put the two together.
No, okay. All right.
Because the cover that Neshama is within the seed. It's when the seed begins the manifestation of being completely closed or begins to open. Once it starts to open, because circumstances are correct environmentally, then it can become the tree.
Yeah.
But so it doesn't fit together. And I find it difficult because a lot of people do that. They want to cross over and cross one society over with another one and put them together. And I find that really offensive.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't allow for the beauty of differences. Even within, for example, Wicca, they'll do this song that goes Isis, Astarte, Diana, Hecate, Demeter, Kali, Inanna, and they put them all together and they think that they're all the same thing. So that's denying the independence of the region that is associated with that name. They want it's homogenization under a title, New Age bullshit.
Yeah.